Good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Afternoon.
How are you
Hello,
doing?
everybody. We're fine, thank you. Good to hear your voices. Thanks for coming along.
Yeah. I'm trying to get the camera to come on. I don't know what's going on.
I think the volume's a little
I had
bit low.
problems. Oh, okay. I'll turn that up a bit. No, it's 80%.
Hi, Lee. How you doing?
Aaron, how's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Possibly warmer than Colorado, but I'm not entirely sure.
Oh yeah, we're sitting at about 5 degrees Celsius today, but not too bad.
Really chilly, but coming out of
It took me a second to unmute and open the camera because I'm not used to the platform as well. It was up in the upper right.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining. I'll tell you what, I've got the heating on down here in Winchester as well.
Yes.
Well, it's the same here in Greater London.
Yeah.
Is it the same?
Yeah.
We were just talking earlier, Andrew, about how chilly it is and the need for extra jumpers and radiators and all the rest of it. So we're all shivering together.
Consistent.
Well, I'm thinking maybe we'll give the others a couple more minutes to show up and log in. But Jose, it's good to hear from you. I think you have some issues with the joining link earlier, but it's all working fine now.
Well, yeah, except I can't get the video to come up.
Technical issues then.
They made a change with Teams a couple of weeks back, and ever since then I've had a problem. Yeah.
Yes. They're quite frequent updates, aren't they? It's
I know.
Yeah.
And every time it's a complete reboot. So I was in a complete state this morning.
It's in the upper right, next to the leave, the red leave.
Yeah, I
button.
know. I've tried that several times. It comes up with
that's
all sorts of other things. Nothing about coming on. So okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always find these updates that take place, particularly the Windows updates, they're always at the worst time. You know, they literally just before a meeting or just before you need to send something urgent, they kick in.
Yeah.
It's often the case.
Yeah.
But there we go. So I don't know how many of you have met Robin. Robin's one of our associates at August Jaeger, so it's a pleasure to have him along today. He'll be presenting on the topic of the GCI, the Game Changing Index.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
It's a real pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, not at all. It's a real pleasure to have you along. And I think there'll be some interesting insights in this when you're talking a little bit about the attributes for leaders, you know, especially in the kind of market we're in now, which is very much defined by volatility and uncertainty. And of course, not to mention the rapid adoption of new operating models in terms of generative AI, other disruptive technologies. So I think the overarching point here is for candidates and job seekers to understand very clearly what their strengths are, how they perform at their best. So the GCI is a pretty interesting way to kind of measure and gain those crucial insights, effectively by identifying your preferred way of making an impact in the marketplace. So thinking it's now almost 25 to, what do you think, Robin? Shall we dive in with the details?
I think let's give it a go. And if anyone joins in, then that's brilliant. If not, let's have a great conversation about accelerating job opportunities.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robin. I'll hand over to you then.
Well, hi everybody. Thanks, Aaron. A pleasure to be here talking with you all today. I'm going to share my screen and just walk you through a few thoughts and slides to give some background here on the Game Changing Index, which is a psychometric tool which many organizations are starting to use and have been using for a few years, but it's growing in popularity. So it's one that is potentially people looking at career transition or job change. It's well worth being aware of and being familiar with. My goal, and I hope this kind of fits with your objectives for the call today, Aaron, is really for us to have a good conversation about how we can use profiling tools like the GCI, and let's maybe keep the conversation a bit broader. So, you know, although I'm going to talk about the Game Changing Index, we can chat about other tools that you may be familiar with as well, and how they can be used to really understand quite deeply how you operate, the types of decisions that maybe will accelerate or help you from a career perspective. And ultimately, when you're looking at job change, what if potential employers could be looking at in terms of finding the right candidates for those roles. So there's just some thoughts in terms of how it's going to go. I'll do some broad overview of the Game Changing Index, and then let's open it up to more in-depth conversation about strengths, opportunities, the way people use it, the way you can use it to really power and inform your career decisions. Now, I've worked broadly in the field of executive coaching, career management, talent strategy, HR leadership for much of my career. And I'm well aware of the way organizations operate when they're looking at people and the decisions that they're taking as they structure their teams, as they look at things like succession planning or executive recruitment or volume recruitment across operations, all of these different things. And global corporations or smaller tech startups or organizations of all shapes and sizes broadly look at people through the same lens. They tend to look at what skills you have to do the job and to do it well. But equally, they do start to look at how you operate. And certainly as an HR leader, I've always encouraged line managers to think about not just what you do, but how you do it. And that's something about the personality too. And I think for anybody that's been involved in recruitment, and Aaron, you're the professional in this space, you can have somebody with a great track record of experience and skills that knows how to do the job, but still there's a cultural question. Do they fit in? Are they the right person for this company? Are they going to really be the person who's going to be accepted by the team or challenge the team, or any of those attributes that you might well be looking for? So that's all about how we are as people, how others see us, and how we see ourselves. Now, if we look at psychometric tests, and I'm sure most of you will be familiar with the concept of psychometric tests, but these are tests that measure some form of how you operate as a person, whether it's your personality, whether it's your intelligence through things like IQ or EQ, or in terms of the Game Changing Index, which is the one we're talking about today. It's the way you impact organizations, get things done, achieve results. So what I'm quite excited by in looking at the Game Changing Index is it starts to uncover, in a way, the hidden value that you have as an employee. And potentially, because of course we're looking at it from a job search and a career transition perspective, how you can be more effective in targeting roles where you're going to be able to add more value. So where you can actually have that significant impact, make a difference, and how you can really accelerate the impact that you have within those organizations. Typically in organizations, there's all sorts of systems out there to look at things like succession management or talent management, performance management, all of those types of things that companies do. They measure your skills, they measure your performance in a job, they look at your CV, so they look at your experience. And quite often, not in every company, but quite often, they look at personality and culture fit. And they use that range of different tests. Maybe it's MBTI, maybe it's 16PF, a number of different psychometrics that are out there that are operating in the corporate world. What they don't do very well is look at impact. And this is where I believe, and the team behind the Game Changing Index have done volumes of research from a scientific point of view, and in terms of testing this in the market, that actually in measuring the impact that you can create this is where the real differentiator lies. This is how you can really start to understand where your skills, where your strengths really make a difference. So if I'm sitting in an organization thinking about hiring somebody in, of course, depending on the nature of the role, then some of the questions that I'm going to be asking as we're looking at that recruitment decision, is this person innovative? Can they shape the future? Can they deliver? If it's about running a program or a project, are they going to be a great project manager? What skills does that need? It's not just about having project manager in their job title from a previous work experience perspective, but do they have the discipline to implement, to plan, to manage, and get into the detail? Or if it's a strategy role that's looking at the future, where do we want to be 3 years' time, 4 years' time, 10 years' time even? How do we start to understand the market dynamics and then create the roadmap that's going together? That's a different set of skills. So at its very basic level, if I was to put that detailed focused project manager into that strategic innovative role, then potentially there's going to be a mismatch. So I would contend that the recruiting manager is going to be asking those questions, but potentially you as the person on the job market looking for that role, or indeed in the organization looking for career advancement and looking for promotion, would be looking, well, what role can I actually be most successful in? Because that's the winning combination. And that's where the magic really happens. If you have this self-awareness to understand not just what you can do from a skills point of view, but where you can really maximize your impact, really make that difference, then that's the formula for success. And if you go into interview situations with that level of energy behind it, then really you've got a compelling proposition.
And I think it's that sorry to interrupt, Robin. I think it's that extra quadrant that makes such a difference. As you say, if it's a person that's very creatively minded, they probably won't perform so well in a role that requires very structured, disciplinarian approaches. So it's that extra component which so far probably relies on the intuition of the headhunter or the talent acquisition contact by and large, but so often is missed. So it's a very valid kind of part of the puzzle in that regard.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, just in terms of background, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide because there's a fair amount of detail behind this, but if we look at that overall sort of systemic approach to organizations, I like to think of this from a sort of systems thinking point of view. All of that sort of depth psychology about what your underlying beliefs are, what your thoughts are, what your emotions look like, life experiences, they all come into play in terms of making you who you are. And then clearly in terms of your track record, your professional experience, that builds in a way, your menu of capability that you take to future roles and to future employers. What the Game Changing Index does is it's not looking at your personality. It's not going to tell you, are you, or tell me, are you a nice person to do business with? Or, how great you are at expressing your emotions. But what it is going to tell me is actually, are you the right person to manage a program? Are you the right person to put into an innovative, game-changing team that's looking at future product innovation? Or actually, are you the right person to put in the middle of all of that, helping bring everybody together and shape the teams from a sort of relationship perspective? Those are very different questions. So let's look at the framework behind the Game Changing Index. And I think what you'll see here is that it's relatively straightforward. It's business language. It's not dressed up in the psychodrama of analysis. So it's readily understandable by line managers, by hiring managers, by recruiters. And actually, it's very accessible by candidates at all stages, actually, of career growth, from sort of really early graduate entrance into the market through to seasoned professionals and senior leadership teams. And we use this a lot, not just in the individual setting, but in the leadership development space too, working with both teams and individuals in terms of strategic fit for opportunities and for challenges in organizations. So broadly what we're looking at here, and the fundamental question is, when this psychometric was first developed, is there anything different about people who can shape the future from people who manage the future and manage the present extremely well? So that's the question. Is there anything different about somebody who is truly a game changer? And the answer to that question was yes, there absolutely is. Now, it doesn't mean to say that it's better or it's right. So there's no sort of hierarchy in this that says, if you're great at strategy, it's better than being a implementer. But if we look at this sort of wheel of different strengths or different dimensions, starting with the game changer, and we can dig into this in a little bit more detail. The game changer is, in effect, the type of person who really shakes things up, shakes the cages, looks to the future, looks to do things differently, really wants to make things happen that are not happening now. The strategist, however, is somebody who knows how to get there. They're able to create that roadmap. They're able to create the business plan, the future of the organization, or the future of the individual, if we're looking at it from a people point of view. How do we get there? Join the dots. So those two tend to work quite well together. So the innovative shaper and changer and the strategic thinking that's looking at actually how are we going to get there. Now the implementer, moving further around this sort of wheel, the implementer is able to deliver practical, action-orientated, results-focused, makes things happen, does not talk so much in the conceptual language of strategy or where do we want to be, but in the here and now of actually this is what we need to be doing to create that impact, to make things happen, to get things done. The polisher looks at it from a perspective of how do we make it the best it possibly can be. So really looking at things from, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it extremely well. There's a quality orientation in there that says, actually, we want to be best in class. We want to make sure everything we do is really fine-tuned. And I think you will see already that what you're building here is a map of a team. And if you've got all of those different strengths and opportunities around that table, potentially you've got a high performance team, depending on what the team needs to do. And that's a very balanced view, isn't it? If you've got all of those, then that's going to be quite focused. But if you're looking at an organization that is about delivering the current as well as it possibly could be, maybe a manufacturing organization that doesn't need to innovate, then just possibly you need a bias towards having more implementers and potentially more polishers. So again, we can look at those profiles in more detail. The playmaker, however, is quite an interesting role. The playmaker orchestrates the future. It's about relationships and it's about building networks. And I think what's quite interesting here is that this is not necessarily about purely being a people person, but this is about understanding that relationships matter. And they matter just as much, if not more, to a playmaker than getting the job done. So think of change programs in organizations where you're looking at people who are going to be the influencer. Not necessarily the formal leadership role, but the people who can network well, build those relationships, really create those influential conversations. They tend to be the playmakers in the team. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of the dimensions behind, well, the dimensions behind the Game Changing Index. And here just to present it in a little bit more of a succinct way, creating original ideas, making sense of those ideas in the strategy dimension, making it happen as the implementer will do, making the ideas brilliant as the polisher will be looking at, and getting the best out of everybody, which is the role of the playmaker. So, I mean, in doing this as a profile, as an individual, it's like many psychometrics, it's a set of tests, it's questions, it's quite straightforward. It's not about intelligence, it's about answering a bunch of questions that's going to give you a profile that aligns with this framework. And you get a set of scores from high to low that'll give you an indication of the types of dimensions here that you operate best in. What's interesting to me is then to map those against the roles that potentially you're looking at going into and see whether there's a fit. Because I would then use that from a coaching perspective to say, actually, how can you really start to develop the areas where there are gaps, or indeed maximize the strengths? My personal preference from a coaching point of view is always to optimize strengths. So it's a strength-based approach. So if you look at this profile and you find, for example, and you probably know this through your own sense of self-awareness, but you're quite conceptual, big picture, you look at the future, you're always trying to join the dots, you're always trying to keep things going into a future perspective, then very much you're in that sort of strategic framework. You're going to be very frustrated if you're in a job that's purely looking at documenting, making things happen, and really driving current activity without that opportunity to really look at making things different for the future. And you could apply that across all of those different dimensions. And let me just pause for breath for a minute while we have a look at this slide, which is, I think, quite a neat summary of the tangible advantages of understanding the profile that applies to you and how that potentially could be explored or exploited in an organizational setting.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And the way it's kind of categorizing, you can almost imagine colleagues, friends, mentors, all the rest of it, and where they may best be positioned in a sense, maybe with some overlap, but in terms of definition, it's quite clear where they would reside. Very, very interesting. I don't know if anyone else in the room, Jose, Lee, Andrew, if you have any kind of thoughts on what you've seen so far, any
Yeah. Actually,
violent
it's
disagreements?
interesting. I was actually reflecting on, I remember when I joined LexisNexis, this is decades, a long time ago, and the sales director employed, I think they were called the Chemistry Group at the time, and they were a HR consultancy, and he gave them the brief to literally turn around the sales team. So I was in an overlay sales team that was slightly separate, and his brief, well, he actually brought in a change management program, Good to Great, where he was trying to change it from a retentions based to a new business and uplift focused team. And it literally was this sort of exercise where he had a profile for all of the different individuals with the different roles that were needed, and those guys were profiling candidates left, right, and centre and screening. It was it was 130 sales team.
Wow. That sounds like a terrific intervention, and it's I'm interested to know whether it actually made a difference in the organisation, but it sounds like it was quite accomplished.
It did. It was very successful. So there was a sort of legacy way of operating that he managed to move away from. So yes, that high level profiling of the ideal fit for the different roles was successful. In ultimately, he was trying to change. He was changing the behaviour. I mean, unsurprisingly, there was performance management elements going on as well. So it was a holistic change of the dynamic of the sales team.
No, that's really interesting, and I think building on that, I was chatting with a team just a couple of weeks back about their sort of profile, and there were quite a few on the team who fitted into the strategist proclivity or the strategist dimension here. Now, one of the interesting thing about the strategist is that they like to think that they're right. And that's a typical trait. I know the future. And I can tell you this because I'm a strategist myself, from a profile point of view. So we like to see future challenges. We like to think we know everything about the market. We like to think we know we've got all of those big picture answers. But actually, if you put 2 or 3 strategists in the same room, they're never going to agree on anything.
No. Yeah. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
I've experienced it several times.
There you go.
They all want to be right.
They all want to be
No,
right.
and they want it their way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So it's their, yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And equally, you see, and this is where there's going to be a flip side of all of these, as there is with any in effect personality or specific trait. So think about this playmaker profile. I think this is quite interesting. Are we getting the best out of everyone in the team? That's a great question for a coach, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
it's a lovely thing to ask, and it's absolutely right to look after the people, make sure people have got the right opportunities. But if you're not actually getting the job done, then you just have a round of conversations about, are we getting the best out of everyone in the team? So I would contend, and again, I'm stressing here that there is no right answer to this. But the question is, what are you trying to achieve in your organization at this time? And out of that, what's the right mix of capabilities that you need around the table to deliver? And, you know, the same with the polisher who wants to make sure everything is absolutely 100%. But actually, other occasions where good enough is perfectly okay. Now, the polisher might miss those opportunities. So as an organizational leader, I'm going to be asking those questions. What's the task? What's the objective? What's the team that we're looking at building? What do they need to do? And what's the profile I need to make that most likely to succeed? Now, then you're going to flip that as a potential job seeker to say, well, actually, where can I add most value? What are the roles that I can really excel in? And they're the ones I'm going to go for. And those are the ones that I'm going to really explore. And actually, I'm going to bring my energy into the interview situation, as well as into my career strategy and my preparation for those types of conversations.
Robin, I have a question.
Yeah, go.
No one is one of these things alone, obviously. Obviously, you talked about the high scores and low scores. So I'm assuming, having not seen the results of anybody, that there's a range across several of these. And you may be a playmaker, but still be a strategist.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And I'll show you on the, I think we've got it on this next slide. If you have a look at these profiles down at the bottom here, you'll see these are examples, perhaps just examples of how it would come out. So you would, as an individual doing this profile, you would get a set of scores in effect that's mapped onto a matrix like this that shows how your proclivities, how your energies are best identified.
Right.
And you use those, we use those from a coaching point of view, we use those from a recruitment point of view, or in an organizational setting, we would use those to make sure that we've got, in effect, the right mix of capabilities around that team. So I come out as a strategist implementer. So that would be, you know, my profile, with the implementer being the high score. So I think I have a 9 on implementer and a 7 on strategist. I think that's what it is. So so my profile would be
like the middle
getting things done, getting things done, but keeping a big picture. I like to understand why I'm doing things. Where's it leading? What's the objective? I don't like conversations that are purely about innovation. I want to be a little bit more practical about that. What difference is it going to make to the company? And what are the steps we're going to take to get things done? But equally, because my score on Polisher is pretty low, actually, I get a little bit frustrated if I've got a team around me saying, well, we've got to finish everything before we move on to the next step. But equally, I mean, I'll share with you as well, and this is probably a little bit awkward as a coach, that my playmaker score is relatively low. It's not massively low, but it's sort of in the middle. So what that says to me is watch out for relationships. Make sure that you remember that you need to check in with people to how they're feeling. So it's not just about doing things, it's about actually, yeah, are we doing the right things for the people around the table, for the team? So, you know, that might not be my first port of call. I need to check myself and make sure that I do that well. Yeah. So you know, there are benefits in the way we have this conversation and the way we use this methodology for individuals. Conversations like this, you know, how are you going to think about your next move from a career strategy point of view? What are the types of roles? How can you best deploy your energy? Where do your skills fit? But equally, from a team point of view, how do we get the best out of this team? And then we can map all of those teams across an organization and say, actually, bigger picture, we know this organization has got to change and has got to innovate, or enter new markets, or really double down on artificial intelligence and get ahead of the competition. Have we got any game changers in there who are capable of that level of truly shaking the cage? And actually, we find we don't. So we better go out and hire some or develop some. So that then informs that sort of recruitment strategy and recruitment pipeline. So a lot to go out there from an organizational perspective as well as from the individual point of view.
Yeah, in fact, we didn't use this tool. We used something else. I forget. I think it was called. Well, I can't remember what it was called now. And it was so interesting because 80% of our employees at the time were kind of, the terms were different, but they were basically balancers and socializers, kind of fitting more into the bottom right here. And only 2% were strategists and 5% implementers. So we had a real struggle to change.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, great for following processes. So if you put a process in place, you didn't have to worry because you knew people would follow it. But getting the process is the problem.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's putting in the foundations first. Yeah, that's the challenging part. Yeah.
And when you had change, talk about resistance.
Yeah. No, I imagine, and you know, change is absolutely endemic at the moment, isn't it? And most organizations are talking about how do we reinvent ourselves for the future. So I suspect that the profile of organizational leadership today is actually very different to what it would have been 10, 15 years ago.
Correct.
So we use the game changing index for career discussions, for individual coaching around performance. We use it for conversations about teams and how to create sort of real impact and collaboration, how to make sure that teams are fully aligned in terms of where they're going. I tend to use it a lot in leadership strategy exercises where you're not so much talking about where the business is going, but actually how aligned is the team in getting there and what are their priorities. So it's great from that perspective. And from an organization perspective, you can use it in large scale change initiatives, as has already been commented, to really understand, in a way, the culture profile of an organization. Yeah. So rather, I just wanted to make sure that we get a view of who's using this. It's actually rapidly being taken up by corporates across the globe. So this is not just me sort of randomly saying here's a great tool to use. So this is why, you know, when Aaron and I were first talking about this, in the world of sort of headhunters, the recruitment market, the career strategy market, actually it's really worth being aware of this. It's not the only tool out there. So I would say, you know, keep a broader perspective. But my pitch on this is, as you're starting to think about either career next steps or indeed how to be as effective as you can possibly be within the role that you've got, self-awareness is absolutely all important. Take every opportunity to get that feedback. If it's not from your organization, it's through instruments like the Game Changing Index, and use it from a personal coaching perspective to accelerate your own development. And that was it. That was where I was taking the discussion. Happy to take any questions.
I'm just going to make a very simple comment, Robin, that
Yeah.
I used DISC early on, and someone else mentioned the sales team, and we did exactly the same thing. Not as big a team; it was only about 60 people, so it was about less than half the size.
Yeah.
And that was interesting how we mapped the team, the sales team in there, and we had to let some people go because they really didn't fit with what we were trying to change. So that was
interesting.
This is a long time ago. This is in the late 80s, early 90s. So interesting. Yeah. So this was quite interesting, and they've evolved somewhat.
Yeah.
But I like the language here better than the other one about being an influence and a driver and a stabilizer and whatever. I forget what the old DISC stands for now. I haven't used it for ages.
I've used DISC myself in the past. I've used a few different tools from sort of MBTI. I've used DISC. It is a good one for sure.
Yes. The MBTI I also used, less so, but I used Hogan.
Hogan's
great, but very complicated. Most people don't get it. But if you're looking for deep understanding in a team or really deep stuff, yes. But it takes a lot of effort from your side.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's just
I'm going to stop sharing at that point. But
that was very interesting.
There's a bit of a whistle-stop tour there, and love to, if anybody's interested, we'd be very happy to, take you through an individual session that involves the profile itself, with an individual feedback session.
Interesting.
But great.
So
Aaron,
was that useful as a question out to the crowd? Did anyone find that kind of particularly useful in terms of the potential insights, the classification, etc.? And by the way, thank you, Robin. I thought that was an excellent run through. I learned quite a lot from that.
I'm going to say something straight away. Sorry.
No, please carry on.
No, go ahead. I've already spoken once.
And I spoke earlier on. So very insightful. And also, whilst I've primarily, seen individual analysis, as in how in a way, how well you fit the team, maybe as the individual sales contributor. This was very interesting.
Yeah, I was going to comment similarly that the team part and then the wider organization, really, I think that has a major plus. In terms of the visuals, also it makes it fairly easier to understand.
Yeah.
And you could, I'm assuming you could then break it up into different divisions and cultural regions as well. If you were across the globe, if you were in Germany versus being, say, in Spain, quite different cultural mixes and how things work there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's globally accepted, and if you look at the sort of volumes of people that have been through this methodology, it's actually pretty consistent across the globe in terms of some of the metrics and the measurements that are coming out. But of course, there's always a sort of individual dimension to this in terms of how you use it. And I think, I go back to what I said. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's not about being better than anybody else. It's about how you deliver maximum impact to yourself.
Yeah.
So Lee, just coming to you, any thoughts in terms of what you've seen? Lee, I know you've been working as a headhunter for many years over in the States. Is this something you've bumped into in the past, or have you kind of utilized it yourself?
I haven't, but I was just saying, when I was back in corporate HR and I was doing so much hiring, especially salespeople, this would have been really good to have aid for like team dynamics, like kind of alignment. But are they using, it's like GCI index, are they using it pre-employment too, or is it only more once you have an established team already?
So it's used right the way through that employee life cycle, typically from that sort of coaching orientation through job seeking, career acceleration, and then from a recruitment perspective. But then probably more widely used in organizations from a team development, individual development, and then a culture change perspective.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, almost like it's taken a bit of, I think, a bunch of different tools I've used in the past. Like you said, one person mentioned a DISC. or like even the Enneagram. Like it's taking, I think, kind of the best from a few different tools and putting it together.
Yeah. Do you remember? Have you come across Belbin's team roles?
Mm.
No.
Plant shaper, chairman. That was around quite a few years ago, actually.
Yeah, 80s and
I find
90s. Yeah.
taken some of those ideas and sort of explored them a little bit further.
What was that called, Robin?
Belbin, Belbin. Yeah, it's from a while back, but it was quite widely used at the time.
Yeah, I know I look older than I am, but I'm actually really young.
Don't look a day over 50.
I got 50 coming up in a couple months.
I don't believe it. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming along. One thing it's maybe worth mentioning and passing on as part of the offering as a thanks for you guys attending, and something you can pass on to friends and family or colleagues. We are offering a slightly discounted opportunity to complete a GCI profiling and receive one-to-one feedback as part of a 90-minute career strategy session, and that would be priced at £200, which is approximately 30% less than the normal price, I believe, Robin. So just something to add into the mix, if that's of interest to anyone in your network that may be looking into a career transition or better self-awareness, feel free to pass that on. We'll share that through a follow-up email in
I
the
wish I
form
had
of a
this
code.
2 years ago. I could have done
2
it.
years ago.
Yeah. I had
Time for an update?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not in the organization anymore, but we were doing a transition of some senior executives being promoted into C-suite positions, and they were all going through this process, and I really could have done with the tool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think it has huge value, tremendous what it can deliver in terms of those transition moments. So as though it really has resonated with everybody. I think everyone kind of got something out of the session and they saw the real value in it. So thank you all for joining it, and thank you especially to Robin for putting those slides together.
Thank you, Aaron, for hosting the call, and it's been great talking to you all. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Enjoyed.
Real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Were there any final questions before we wrap up? Or?
I assume this can be done virtually, right? So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in multiple languages or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be.
Aaron, can you exercise your Dutch?
Well, it's not that great. It needs updating. The Swahili's a bit better though, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's an addition in that language yet, but we're working on it.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for joining. Really appreciate the time. We'll, as I say, we'll put this onto YouTube. We'll follow up with an email, and we will see you, I guess, on the next one.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
All the
Bye.
very best.
Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.